We're back now, and we're just talking about Tom, my Peter McNamara's dog, and you were talking about how kids should like dogs and things like this. But you want to talk a bit
Well,
about
I was saying that it's always nice for a kid to have a dog, but not everybody can have a dog. There are a lot of flies on you. There
yeah.
are no flies on me.
Shall we pick up where we left off?
Yes. Well, uh, one of the things I want to say about my childhood is that I had something, I think it's called gender dysphoria, which was an indication, even at an early age, 5 and 6, that I would be gay. And that is, that I like dolls, I like tea sets, I like girly things. And for many gay men, that is kind of a sign early on that they are gay, that they will manifest that later in life. But I liked a lot of other things too. I mean, I was a quote normal boy also, but there was also this part of me. Uh, so moving along, uh, the war came. We were on December 7th, 1941. We were driving in the country around Fresno, uh, and we came home in our terraplane. I want to say a word about the terraplane, if you don't mind.
Please.
Why my parents bought a terraplane, I'm not really sure. But the terraplane was the low end model in the Hudson line. And the Hudsons were a car company which went out of business just after the Second World War. So we had this terraplane, and it had what's called suicide doors that open. The front doors open this way, the back doors open that way. And so, you can fall out. And actually, I had a friend in school to whom that happened, not
Mm.
in our car, but in another car. But anyway, we were driving the terraplane and came home, turned on the radio, and there was the announcement of the Pearl Harbor attack. And my father was in the reserves, the Army Engineers Reserves, and so he had to report the next day. It was the December 7th, 1941 was a Sunday, and so he had to report that on the Monday. And so once he reported, and war was then declared by Roosevelt, and so we were in the war. Basically that was everything then moved into a war footing. And one of the first things that affected my life was that my father was called to a training session in Inglewood, California, which is a suburb or a part of, I'm not sure, Los Angeles. And I had never been to Los Angeles before. Uh, so we were in a motel in Inglewood, and my father would come home. But I, uh, I remember then an incident that they made a movie out of, actually, called 1941 or 2, I forget what it is. But it's when there was a Japanese plane or planes over Los Angeles. And we heard the sirens, we saw the spotlights, and we went outside and you could see the planes. And there was a headline in the early editions of the newspaper saying Jap plane over LA, something like that. And it was shot down, and then it was hushed up. They didn't. They cut the story, and it never officially appeared until after the war. But that was very exciting.
I'm sure it's scary too.
Yeah. So uh, my life was basically, as a child, uh, at that point, going from Fresno to Inglewood for about maybe 9 months or so. And I was in 1941, I was 7. So that meant I was in second grade. I attended the Fresno State Teachers College Lab School.
Hmm.
It's called Training School. I was a student at the training school, and I loved school, and it was a wonderful experience. And since it was a teachers college lab school, I had lots of student teachers, and so we had very small classes and lots of individual attention, and I really liked it. And so we would drive back and forth in our car, which was by this time a 1942 Hudson. We sold the Terraplane and went up to a Hudson. The Hudson was a coupe. It had 2 doors and a little back seat. And this car was the worst car ever built. And of course, it was the last car also sold before the Hudson Company went into war production and stopped making cars and stopped, as we say now, supporting cars. And so this car we would drive this car from Fresno, which in itself is very hot, down through the desert near Bakersfield, through an area called Kettleman Hills to LA. And of course there were no freeways or expressways. And so you were going through very, very hot country with the windows open, no air conditioning, of course, in the car. And this car would get something called vapor lock, which meant that if you stopped, it wouldn't start. Once you had turned off the motor, it had to cool down before you could start it again. So it was a great pain in the neck, this car. But it was the only car we could have because they weren't selling cars anymore because of the war. So anyway, we went back and forth to Inglewood a number of times. And my father finally finished whatever he was doing there. And then he was assigned to the engineering school in Fort Benning, Georgia, which meant that that was the first big trip that I ever made in my life. And we drove the Hudson across southern U.S.
Well, let's pause there, and we'll pick up on your route to Georgia.
Okay.